Okay, so please fill those out at the end if you have some time and want more info on anything in particular. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce to you all of our panelists. And thank you to our sponsors. We'll thank them again at the end, but we couldn't do this without them. My name is Kirsten Bonneau. I'm a partner at PBWS Architects. We're a 67-year-old Pasadena-based architectural firm. We're just on the other side of the freeway. I'm passionate about creating built environments that embrace and integrate the natural environment, resulting in places which support wellness for individuals, families, and communities. I've worked on projects throughout Altadena, Pasadena, and Sierra Madre, including modernization of Altadena Elementary School, the new Sierra Madre Middle School campus, 5 acres research and training center, and schematic design for a replacement building for the Sierra Madre Public Library, among others. I have extensive experience as a workshop leader and consensus builder with user groups and members of the public. And with over 18 years of experience, I've led teams on educational, nonprofit, civic, and multifamily housing projects. Next up, we have Christian Ahumada. Christian was born in Chile and came to the US in the late 1970s. His passion lies in the evolution of cities, community building, integration of individuals of all socioeconomic strata, sustainability, environmental resiliency, racial equity, and ending homelessness. Christian's primary goal today is to advance new, faster, and more economic models of housing that do not rely on the utilization of low-income housing tax credits. Over the last 20 years, he has overseen the development of thousands of affordable and permanent supportive housing units, including commercial spaces, park space, paseos, living lungs, etc. During his tenure as executive director at Holos Communities, Christian has shifted the narrative of the organization from being a developer of housing and communities to being a developer of ecosystems. These paths will advance solutions for the multiplicity of challenges ahead: the homelessness crisis, global warming, racial and environmental inequity, and the displacement of small and BIPOC-owned businesses. He believes that for too long, we've attempted to resolve these issues through disparate strategies and mutually exclusive solutions, and this new approach will solve for these challenges together because they are all inherently interconnected. Christian is a graduate of the California State Polytechnic University, Pomona, with a degree in urban and regional planning. He loves to spend time with his son, Diego, train Taekwondo, play chess, garden, barbecue, and look for UFOs. Christian is here to represent sort of the owner role as we talk about the process as we go through. Leland Kuntz is a highly experienced insurance appraiser and umpire. He has worked in the insurance industry for over 20 years and has successfully handled hundreds of residential and commercial insurance claims. Mr. Kuntz. Mr. Kuntz is skilled in estimating property damage and business income losses, and he has proven ability to manage complex claims. Mr. Kuntz has a strong educational background and holds several licenses and certifications. He's a former Texas independent adjuster and a former California independent adjuster. He is also a member of the California Department of Insurance Review Committee for revising the independent adjuster examination. In addition to his work as an insurance appraiser, Mr. Kuntz is also a certified public adjuster. He has extensive experience in the construction industry, which gives him a unique perspective when it comes to assessing property damage. Mr. Kuntz is also fluent in English, German, and Spanish. Marcus Castro, and I'm sorry, I don't have an extensive bio for you. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course, yes. I sent you one. Good morning, I'm Marcus Castro. I'm a mortgage loan officer at US Bank. I have over 26 years of residential lending experience. I'm also a certified construction loan officer at US Bank, and I'm very glad to be here and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
So Mr. Kuntz will be doing the insurance portion of the presentation.
Okay, so just to clarify, I'm a public adjuster now. That's my main activity. The appraisal and umpire is a special type of arbitration that's in the statute, but it's not compelled after a declared fire disaster. So you might be able to do that, and I can talk about that, but that's something that may not happen.
Okay. But obviously very versed in insurance. That's why we brought him. We're architects. We don't know that. So, And then Marcus will be talking to the sort of lender side of finance side of the equation. Jimmy Clegg is a seasoned construction professional with over 13 years of experience as the president of Oakmont Builders, Inc. Under his leadership, the company has established a reputation for constructing top quality custom homes and commercial properties throughout Los Angeles County. Oakmont Builders, Inc. is a James Hardie Building Products elite builder. Prior to his construction career, Jimmy was a firefighter paramedic, bringing a unique blend of public service and problem-solving skills to his work. In addition to his thriving construction business, Jimmy is deeply committed to giving back to the community. He currently serves as the vice chair of the Burbank Boys and Girls Club Board of Directors, where he plays a crucial role in supporting youth safety programs. So Jimmy is our contractor for the panel to speak to the role of the contractor. Next is Jay Zapata. Jay is a national award-winning architect whose passion is to deliver exceptional projects on time and on budget through an organized delivery process. He has worked as a consultant architect for the Getty Institute in Brentwood and was the project architect for season 4 of HGTV's show, The Outdoor Room with Jamie Dury. He also worked as a project architect for AC Martin from 2012 to 2017. He's a founding principal of Sprout Architecture, which he started to better serve clients by having a personalized approach to design services. The architectural firm which is located in the city of San Gabriel, has organically grown in the multifamily, commercial, franchise, and federal funded markets. More importantly, the firm has secured dozens of certificates of compliance for single-family residences located within historic district zones in Pasadena, South Pasadena, and other cities in Southern California. He has also served as board president in 2019 for the American Institute of Architects Pasadena and Foothills chapter, where they reached out to the community to learn more about ADUs and cannabis ordinances newly placed in the state of California. He currently resides in the city of Pasadena with his family and is a true believer of sustainable ways of commuting around town. Next is Ricardo Roldan. I'm sorry, did I have it wrong?
Perfect, yeah.
Okay. I want to make sure I had it right because I didn't on his name tag. Dr. Roldan is a Pasadena resident and an accomplished structural engineer with over 15 years of experience in the assessment of existing structures and design and management of complex engineering projects. His expertise extends to design management for a major data center provider, where he has successfully led mechanical, electrical, and architectural teams on large-scale projects. In addition to his practical experience, Ricardo serves as an adjunct professor at Woodbury University, where he shares his knowledge and passion for structural engineering with the next generation of architects. Throughout his career, Ricardo has played a pivotal role in advancing engineering practices and standards, contributing to multiple code writing committees, both nationally and internationally, that shape industry building codes. He is currently serving as the ad hoc fire committee response chair of the Structural Engineers Association of Southern California. So he's been the guy talking a lot about foundations. So he's our structural engineer for today. And we're super delighted to have these last two people join us. As you know, the county has been incredibly busy in the response. So we have Sean Donnelly from Regional Planning and AIA Padilla from Building and Safety. Sean Donnelly is a senior planner for LA County Planning, having spent the past 10 years in the planning field. His experience includes work reviewing a variety of development projects for both new and existing uses, including single and multifamily residential, commercial, industrial, and wireless facilities. He has worked in a diverse geographical areas such as Florence Firestone, Catalina Island, and the Santa Monica Mountains, and most recently has been focused on the foothills communities, including Altadena. Sean is currently working to assist residents with the recovery of their communities by providing information and feedback on county planning requirements at the Altadena One-Stop Center and reviewing applications for rebuilding. And then AIA Padilla is a civil engineer with Los Angeles County Public Works. She's been an employee of the County of Los Angeles for 17 years and has been in building and safety for over 12 years. She's a registered civil engineer with a Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering from the University of South Florida and a Master of Science in structural engineering from Ohio State University. She has experience with the county building codes as well as building and safety policies and procedures for submittals and plan check. So,
Really?
We have quite the panel assembled for you, but we felt it was important to have all these different expertises present so that they can answer your questions from the full perspective, not just our architect hand wavy sort of perspective. And so I'm gonna turn it over to, oh, no, I'm not. I'm gonna talk, okay, briefly about the planning process. So for every, and this graphic is available in hard copy at the check-in desk and as well on our website. And you'll get a copy of the presentation at the end because it's a lot of information. We put together this graphic that explains to you sort of the process in multiple tracks. For every construction project, whether it's from a disaster or not, we go through a process of pre-design, design, construct, agency review, which is part of design, and construction. And then there's some things that happen post-construction. And so we're going to talk to you about what happens when, as we go through this presentation. It's important to know as you go through a construction process, there are a lot of decisions that you make along the way, and it can feel very overwhelming, but you don't have to make them all at once. Pre-design, you're going to want to look at your big picture, your budget, your financial, situation to help establish your budget. What are your goals? What is, and Jay will talk some more about this, about a program for your space, which is basically what kinds of spaces do you want and how big should they be? What are your priorities? What things are musts? What things are you going to say, I'd really like this, but I can live without it if it doesn't work out, right? And then when you get to design, you'll work through with your architect phases that we call, they're on here somewhere. Maybe they're not on this one, maybe they're on another one. We work through phases that you'll hear called schematic design, design development, construction documents, and then agency approvals. And we start big picture and we get more detailed as we go. And then you'll go through the agency process and get approvals for permits, and then you'll start construction. So we're gonna walk you through this whole thing as we go through. And so next one, oh, there's our intros. Sorry, that's okay.
There we go.
So we're going to start with agency, and Jay's actually going to talk a little about agency and talk about some of the big picture things you need to understand from an agency perspective as you get started.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, the first step that we usually take when we take a project into our studio is we talk about your program. We talk about square footage. Some clients are a little disappointed with our process, but we usually have just a spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet pretty much shows the amount of square footage that you want to achieve and what are those spaces. As we all know, construction is based on price per square footage. And you have all heard that every space that you have is going to have a cost. Previous to the fire, we're looking at something between $400 to $450 square foot. It's what we've been seeing through the market. Unfortunately, we don't know where that number is going to be, but that pretty much ties to your budget. So the first thing we do is we have a table, and it's pretty much numbers because those numbers translate to your project costs. And after that, we pretty much start then designing your space. In your case, if you're thinking of a rebuild, one of the conversations we'll be having with clients, it's the 110% number. This is a very, very important number for two reasons. One is the process with the city will be streamlined, with the county, I'm sorry. It will be easier for them to review your project and your plans. And two, which is being clarified now by the county public assessors for your property taxes, is that will not affect your property taxes on the long run, which is very important, as long as you're rebuilt within 5 years. So that's the other part that is very important to know. So once that we have a program, once that we know a target for square footage, once that we know your program and what is your goal, we go ahead and move forward with the engineering portion of the project, which is where you get a structural engineer involved. And that's when we also do your energy conservation calculations. While we do that, we also recommend that you start interviewing contractors. That's also a big conversation of our process. We recommend that you usually interview a minimum of 2 or 3 contractors, so you can start getting bids for your project. While your project,
Before we jump that far
Yes, I'm
into
sorry.
it, I want to stick with the initial, like, the planning part. And maybe Sean, you can give us a brief explanation of that 110% and why that's important and what that means when the other thing that people will throw out all the time is like for like. So if you could give us just a brief touch on that, why that's important.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. And so essentially the 110% or the like for like that we call it, we have our disaster recovery ordinance in our zoning code. And so with that 110%, essentially, if you stay within that square footage, so within, 10% extra of what you had previously, our review is streamlined, and kind of the main benefit there in terms of, design and timeline is that whatever standard you had previously for zoning, you would be grandfathered in. So if your, building was too close to the property line, you don't meet the current setback, you don't have, the 2-car garage that's required, or there's something like that. But, today, if you just came to apply, we would normally tell you, no, you have to change that. If you stay within that 110%, you can put back what you had previously. So you can rebuild, similar to your previous house. So that does a couple of things. One, of course, for the design phase, that lets you have what you had before, whereas normally we would tell you, oh, no update bits. The other thing that helps is streamlines the process, because if, we can look at the building permit history, look at the assessor records and see, okay, this was your house previously, these standards all meet. That's a much quicker review than having to do a review of the whole zoning code. So that can save a couple of weeks to a couple of months off of the review time for our department and keep you moving forward with that. So if you stay within that 110%, then that expedited process. Of course, if you want to go over that, that's fine, but you just need to meet the current zoning code as if you're applying at any other time, although we'll still prioritize the application.
So I'm going to ask a couple follow-up questions. So can you, just because many people in this room probably, actually, how many people here are affected homeowners? Oh, good. A huge percentage. Okay. Because I know we also have a lot of like architects and other like professionals, but homeowners who've never had to do anything related to building might not understand the difference between zoning code and building code, and the difference between regional planning and building and safety. Can you guys give us a touch on that, what those differences are?
Definitely. And so essentially with, the county agency review process for a new building, you've got my department, which is regional planning, and then you've got building and safety, which is a division of the public works department. And so normally in the permitting process, we're the first step. And so we take care of the zoning code, which is Title 22 of the county code. And so essentially, zoning codes typically, they look at, the overall design, the height limits, FARs, which is, the amount of square footage you can have on a property, parking requirements, landscaping, all those types of kind of overall design. And so that's what we review for. And then once we've approved, you move to building and safety, and they're more of the structural and building code requirements.
Yeah, so building and safety, we're enforcing the county building codes, which include the building code, the residential code, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, the green building code, the existing building code. Those are all under the purview of building and safety's review. And what we're looking for is 2 things: fire life safety, and then the structural, that you're meeting the minimum structural requirement. So the fire life safety and the energy too. So the fire life safety is are your window openings in your bedroom, are they large enough for emergency egress to get out during emergency and for emergency personnel to get in? Those are the kind of things we're looking for safety, making sure that you have fire sprinklers for new construction, that you have the proper egress into and out of the building. We're also, so that's like on the architectural side, the architectural plans. And then the structural plans, we're looking at making sure that the plans that, the tier walls are designed correctly for the current code. That the spans of your beams are spanned to the minimum requirement for the span that you're looking at. So we're looking at the structural side and the architectural side. In addition to that, we also do review on the state energy requirements. And so that is the insulation in your walls, that is the ventilation into and out of your attic. Those kind of things are under the energy standard. So those are the things that building and safety. So building and safety, we don't care how tall, how close to the property line you put it, you know, that's not our purview, that's planning. So when you submit, your plans will have to comply with both regional planning and building and safety.
Okay, and so I think this is a key thing, is that when we talk about like for like, that means that you're like for like on the planning side, the how big, where it is on your lot, what parking you have, those kinds of things. So you will be able to, if you stay within 110%, you will be able to build like for like. And my understanding is that doesn't mean it has to be exactly the same looking house. It doesn't have to be exactly the same floor plan, right? You can make changes inside as long as it's the same size and in the same general location.
So exactly, when we say like for like, we're talking about the general building dimensions, height, square footage, distance from the property line, the general footprint of the building. You can change the floor plan as much as you want, add a pantry, add a bathroom, add a, you know, move the kitchen to the other side of the house. That's all perfectly fine. So when we say like for like, we just mean the general overall dimensions. And one clarification of that's good to make, and this is kind of a, you know, kind of a sign of our process, kind of trying to evolve and you know, need to. But with that 10%, we are allowing at least 200 square foot additions. So 10% or 200, whichever is more. And so we're, you know, trying to work with people. So if your house is, you know, 900 square foot, normally 10% will give you 90 square foot, but we'll let you go up to a 200 foot increase with that.
I've seen a couple hands pop up. I'm sorry. We're gonna do the questions at the end. I know because we have so many people to talk, really, you know, we're gonna try and keep it tight at the front, and then we'll take questions at the end. I know there's gonna be a ton of them. So if you need something to write them down, we have some question sheets in the overflow room in the other room if you want to grab one and write your question down and keep it through the end, just to keep things moving, okay? So I'm gonna move on from agency and we'll ask more questions of agency, but I think one of the key takeaways is regional planning cares about where it is and how big it is. And if you stay within that 110%, you don't have to go through extensive reviews with them. It's more of just a quick sign off. And then building and safety is more the technical review of your building, and they are going to want everything up to current code. So like for like doesn't mean you get to build it exactly the way it was. You have to meet current structural, energy, all of those types of things. Okay, and we're gonna move on because we got to keep going. So Christian, if you want to touch on, you know, some of the owner's role.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what's a good place for me to give you something. What you're experiencing, what the county is experiencing, the architects are experiencing, is unprecedented.
I'm sorry,
What?
the people in the back is hard to hear.
Oh, okay, I'll stand up. What I'm trying to say is this is unprecedented, right? So this housing stock was built 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s at a time when that global warming, those effects were not what they are today, and they're going to gradually get worse. So we need to be thinking about how to build in a manner that's more resilient. And that's unprecedented for the county as much as it is for the developers, as much as it is for the builders. So, for instance, type 5 is wood construction. And that has a fire rating, Jimmy, of
1 hour.
1 hour. Okay, but we know that that's no bueno, right? So you say, well, what else can I use? So for instance, there's prefab products today. And I want to invite you to think, because the images that you may come to your mind, you may not like, right? But this space has advanced a lot. So for instance, there are these beautiful shipping containers products. There are products that are made out of concrete that are gorgeous. There's also mass timber, which is beautiful wood that has a 3-hour fire rating and can actually go up. So there's a variety of different ways that you can build. And within that space, I also invite you to think more holistically, because the architects are going to essentially bring that program that you give them, but the space is very linear. So by that, I mean, for instance, we think of just the house as the protection against the fire. But throughout the world, there's many different models that exist that can create things like fire breaks. And within nature, there are trees that are much more resilient. So to think of that, for instance, front yard or backyard or park as being fire resilient and being able to work with the county to create those models for the future, to therefore prevent things that we know that are going to happen again. So I'll stop there.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you a few questions too, and to sort of draw some things out of you that I think might be helpful to people. One that I want to ask you, as somebody who develops buildings regularly, obviously you think about a lot of considerations ahead of time, right? And we as designers, we think about some of these things as well in terms of the priorities for the construction and stuff. What kinds of questions do you ask the design professionals who you work with before you hire them to sort of understand their priorities and who they are, and that they're going to be a good fit for you?
Can you follow? Form follows function. Think about that for a second. Right? Form follows function, right? So for instance, you want first the house to be fire resilient, not the image of a house first. So you're working in, out. That is critical, absolutely critical. And the second question that we ask is, do you perform something that we call a resiliency dashboard? Because every geography is different, right? So if you live in Pacoima, the same way as if you would live in Altadena, you're prone to wildfires because the currents of air are much, much stronger, which would be different if you're by the ocean, right? Or maybe you're in a high water table. Each of these are different. So therefore, do you have expertise in dealing with these sort of natural disasters that now we have to adapt to and become resilient to? So those are the first two questions. And those are difficult questions to ask, because typically an architect's accustomed to, I want to design X, Y, and Z. And now we're living in a very different place than we were, say, 50 years ago, when you really didn't think about it unless you were maybe in an area that got hit again and again and again with emergencies, which I think, I'm sorry, Leland can probably tell you a lot about.
So I'm going to ask you a very nitty-gritty detailed question. Can you talk about some of the other special, like, reports, tests, things that your team has to gather before they hire or to start a design process, things that owners might not know that they're going to need to consider, other professionals they're going to need to engage?
This is a more traditional thing, right? But for instance, you'd have to do a geotech report, right? Soil test, to be able to figure out what that foundation looks like, right? You might have to do a phase one, right? Because a phase one is essentially, is your soil contaminated or not? And you may think, well, it's only been historically residential uses, but this fire unto itself may actually have contaminated the soil, right? So you have to think about these pieces. We call these third-party studies. And there's a whole bunch of them that you have to do, including appraisals, which are also part of that to be able to figure out if it's even worth building. So that investment, I think, is a great question to ask the insurance folks that are in the room to see if that can come out of the insurance proceeds, because that comes up front.
Okay, we're gonna keep moving and that's a good segue. We're gonna move over to Leland's now.
What am I supposed to talk about?
Well, you can talk about some of, we've thrown this together a little quick, so we haven't had a whole lot of time to coordinate exactly, but just let's talk about, you know, what are some of the initial questions that you think a homeowner should ask their insurance agent in terms of what they can pay for with their, you know, the money that they receive for the rebuilding process?
Well, first off, this is a really dysfunctional industry. It's a really dysfunctional process. And I really think it probably helps if you understand it as a spiritual challenge. You know, I started off thinking, okay, I need to become really expert at construction to master what I do. I need to become really expert at the software that everyone uses. Then as I progressed in my career, I thought, okay, I need to understand the policy. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, the policy has stuff in it that conflicts with the statute, so I need to understand the statute. And then I realized, oh, I have to understand the case law. Now, there's a lot of adjusters who think like, why would I know case law? Because I'm an adjuster, I'm not an attorney. I'm talking about the people on the other side of the table, you know, where I used to sit. Well, actually in California, the adjuster is required by law to state the facts, the policy, the case law, the statute, which supports their denial if they're going to deny or partly deny your claim. So adjusters are required to know the case law. For example, we have a case law in California, Doan versus State Farm, where they can't value your burned up Louis Vuitton purse on the fact that it's 15 years old. They have to value it on the fact that it was brand new in the original box. And it was essentially brand new, even though it was old. So there's a tremendous amount of case law, statute, trade standards, and basically, if you had your home burned down, you have about a month or two to get a master's degree in construction, architecture, building, policy interpretation, law. It's overwhelming. And so to me, you know, I've been studying this and trying to learn, and I'm overwhelmed sometimes. So I made some notes. I was a little apprehensive coming here today. I was thinking, okay, somebody's going to ask me a question about a fire, and I don't even know the names of the fires. So I looked them up. My wife helped me look them up, and there's the Palisades Fire, the Hughes Fire, the Border 2 in San Diego, the Kenneth Fire, which is in Los Angeles on the 9th of January, the Hearst Fire, the Lydia Fire, the Rosa Fire was in San Luis Obispo, the Lilac Fire was in San Diego, and then we had a Laguna Fire in Ventura. So there's so many fires. Who could even keep track of the names? So what I would say is you got to have a process, and you got to just take a deep breath. And I would start with your policy. When you ask your agent, unfortunately, most of the time the agents don't even know what the policy is. And if you ask them for a copy, they won't give you one because they don't even know what it is to be able to send you a policy. They will send you a declaration sheet, which is abbreviated as a deck sheet. And I routinely tell people, ask your agent for a copy of the policy, and they're probably going to give you the deck sheet. And then you need to tell them that you want the whole policy. I tell people that before it even happens, and 80% of the time it happens. The agent won't send you a copy of the policy. Now, the fine print of the policy is really where a lot of the money is hiding, because the policy, so let me explain something to you. When you talk about the policy, like the way a lawyer would look at it, and by the way, I'm not a lawyer, don't give legal advice, but the way a lawyer would look at it is the policy is all the documents. Okay, the way your agent might think is the deck sheet, because that's the superficial meat, but it doesn't have all the detail. The declaration sheet is the document that's for you, for your address with your limits and your policy number. That's a document filled out unique for you. The policy form is a standard form, and a lot of the insurance companies use the same forms. They use an ISO form, which stands for Insurance Standards Office or Organization. And so, for example, the HO3, you can have 20, 30 insurance companies use the same HO3 form. It won't have your name on it. But in that form, it will say there's an additional, it might say this, there's an additional 5% for debris removal. You might have an endorsement that says you have extended replacement cost or guaranteed replacement cost where you got a 50 or 100% bump up. So a lot of the money is not going to be even reflected on the declaration sheet. It's going to be in the other endorsements. People always say, well, why is my mortgage company's name on the check? Well, you may not have been paying attention. Maybe you had a mobile notary come to your house when you bought your house, or you refinanced and they said initial here, initial here, initial here, and you're initialing this thick stack of paperwork. One of the things that you agreed to was that the mortgage company would be an additional loss payee on your policy. So they're not left holding the bag when your house burns down. They don't want to be having collateral as a burned lot. So you agreed to that, whether you remember it or not. And that's an endorsement in your policy. Your insurance company, your loan wouldn't have gone through if that wasn't part of the paperwork. So that's why your mortgage, there's an endorsement that puts your mortgage company's name on the policy. So that's your policies, all those paperwork. So that's what I would start with. And then I would ask myself, like, okay, what are the buckets of money? This is how I approach claims as an adjuster. Is the first thing I would do is say, okay, what are the buckets of money? And do we have any damages that fit into those buckets? So, maybe half of you have plants, trees, and shrubs coverage, which might be only $5,000 with $500 per tree. Your lawn is not considered an individual plant. So your lawn alone could hit your 5,000. Now, maybe that's not a huge amount of money. That's the tail on the dog, but don't you deserve that money? If you have that coverage, you should ask for it, and you could apply that money towards your house. Okay, because that's not money that you are required to spend on a lawn. You could always build your house, come up short on the money, and then plant trees later when you get some more money. So you need to know where all the buckets of money are. Your debris removal, your extended replacement cost, your personal property, your ALE. Now, under insurance code section 2060, you can use other structures money for the dwelling and vice versa. You can use your personal property money, obviously, for anything you want, including your dwelling. Your ALE money, you can't really use that towards your dwelling unless you work some sort of special deal. It needs to be legal and ethical, but you could perhaps tell the insurance company, hey, I want to rent a temporary structure of some kind, maybe that your architecture can help you figure out, and I want to rent this. And so that's a living expense to put this structure in the back, which later on is going to become my ADU. So it's theoretically possible that you could use housing money towards rebuilding, but that's difficult to do because usually you have to use your housing money for housing. And that coverage, like your code upgrade, is use it or lose it. So one of the interesting things, the building department comes into play here is that insurance companies are infamous for saying, well, we're not paying for that code upgrade unless you can get a red tag notice, which is completely nuts. So basically what the adjuster is telling you is that you have to have your contractor do it wrong and then have the inspector come by and red tag it. And then the adjuster will agree that it's required by law, which is completely nuts. Okay. But short of that, they'll say, well, we don't believe that that's enforced. So, but see, it's very Orwellian because they have different definitions of the meaning of the words. So the building department says like, hey, even if we don't have an inspector to go over there, we adopted the code by city ordinance. So therefore it's enforced. And the insurance adjuster says, no, it's not enforced unless you get a letter from the city. And then you call the city and they say, well, we're not in the business of writing letters to help your adjuster understand what's in the building code. So there's a lot of trouble with people getting this money that they're entitled to. But, talk about like, say, for example, a retaining wall. A lot of people might have a retaining wall that's made out of recycled concrete, and that's not going to meet the current code. So maybe what they can do with their architect is say, look, we'll just, instead of an 8-foot retaining wall, we'll do 2 that are 4 feet, and we'll keep it under the requirement for having engineering, and we'll save money that way. But if you have the code upgrade coverage and you don't need it for dual pane glass or a new electrical panel or more shear panel, you could use that code upgrade money for your retaining wall if your policy allows it. And so the thing is, the problem is there's so many rabbit holes to go down, and I could spend so many hours. So maybe we can have when the questions come.
Yeah, I want to just ask you a question that maybe isn't in people's minds yet, and I don't know if you'll know exactly the answer to this, but there are insurance questions during the building process as well, right? Like you have to have certain types of insurance coverage during construction. Can you talk at all
Okay,
about that?
so there's a thing called a builder's risk policy, which builder's risk would be a special policy that you buy that either the builder can buy it or the lender can buy it or the homeowner can buy it. But you should also still have coverage from your existing homeowner policy. So for example, if there was theft of building materials during the construction, or if the contractor's truck rolled off your house and hit the neighbor's house, you know, your existing homeowner coverage is covering that. Now, people might think, well, why should I keep paying on my insurance when my house is burned to the ground? Well, if someone comes, now I'm not a lawyer, and this is getting into liability, so that's really outside my area. But if somebody were to get hurt on your construction site, you would presumably have liability coverage, even though you don't have a dwelling to cover anymore. So you want to be careful about dropping your coverage during construction, and it should cover things like another fire. You know, contractors are always, no offense, but they're always starting fires on property, you know. But yeah, the plumber is soldering the pipe and it starts a fire. You know, somebody, they open the taps when the water shut off. As soon as the water turns back on, it floods. You know, somebody in here, God forbid, is going to have a brand new house. They're so happy, and it's going to get flooded as soon as the water gets turned on. It happens.
And so can you explain a little bit what the builder's risk covers?
Well, do you ever buy builder's risk?
Yeah, builder's risk is kind of like a gap insurance between, and it's more for new construction as opposed to where you already had an insurance policy in place. But if you bought a lot and you started constructing a home, you don't have homeowner's insurance yet. You'd have a builder's risk policy, and that's going to cover your liability. It's going to cover the theft. It's going to cover if for some reason that house in the middle of construction burns down. And typically when you're financing a construction project, the bank is going to require that builder's risk policy because they want something that's, they're collateralizing that loan with something that you're building. And in the interim, if something happens to it, they don't have, any way to recoup their costs. So they usually require it. Right. It's an interesting question in terms of a rebuild where you already had an existing homeowner's policy. And if that policy coverages continue through the construction process,
it probably will.
Would. It's a great question.
But if you're underinsured and you're building something much more majestic,
yep,
you might want to have your contractor get a builder's risk policy.
Absolutely.
One more.
Maybe I would say you should always get the contractor to get their risk building insurance, even if you're building in a burned property,
right?
Like 100% as for that.
Yeah, well, and for example, if you have California Fair Plan, it doesn't cover plumbing leaks, but a builder's risk policy would.
Right.
One more question, in terms of the insurance, are there any design considerations that may impact future insurability of the home once it's completed that people should start thinking about now?
That's a little outside my area because it's kind of an underwriting question. But, there are people who, brutalism apparently is very popular with the Hollywood set now. So you build a concrete structure. And I know people have done this where they said, you know what, I can't get insurance, it's too expensive, let me just build a concrete structure. But some of those burn down, so, who knows? But, if you have California Fair Plan, like I said, they don't cover water leaks. So some properties survive water leaks much better than others. If you have slab on grade with the engineered floor, you're replacing all of your flooring. But if you have an older home with hardwood floors, the water drips down through the floor into the crawl space, and you might only be replacing one room. So, but that's really a question outside my area. Can you build a home that is not going to have claims?
No, certainly. I do, and again, it is an underwriting question, and even for people who are renewing policies, there's a list of things they're making people do that pertain to obviously fire prone areas, but also putting in automatic water shutoffs.
Yes,
because we have a lot of claims with
I just
water.
had a customer with Chubb and
Chubb's a big one.
they told her that she must install a automatic.
It's a smart automatic
Yeah,
water thing.
it sends alerts that you have a water leak and Chubb is paying for it.
Yep.
Which is really interesting.
Yep, absolutely. So the underwriting is always gonna have upgrades to your home to renew policy. This is probably no different.
What is Chubb?
It's
It's an
a,
insurance carrier.
yeah, it's considered one of the better insurance companies. And that's true a lot of times.
So something to consider talking about with your own insurance, is,
Right.
you
So
know,
are there any things that are a deal killer for getting insurance? Like if you build a house with certain features, is it gonna make it hard for that homeowner to get insurance?
We can talk about wood shingles all day.
Yeah.
Wood
Yeah,
shingles
well, those
are-
one-
are
But those
a
aren't
killer.
code anyway.
Right, but I would say at this point, anything that's gonna be in a fire prone area, which obviously that's everywhere now. You're not gonna be able to build with combustible materials on the outside of the home. Whether that be wood siding, fascia, anything on the outside of the home, you don't want it to be combustible, patio covers, decks.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything that's allowed by code, but the insurance companies won't like it and you'll have a harder time getting insurance?
right.
Is there anything like that?
Vents, we can
Yeah,
talk about vents.
Such as?
Well, I will say that, we have fire zones, right? So portions of Altadena are in the very high severity fire zone. But a lot of the portions that experienced the burn were not in the fire zones. So the building code is chapter 7A of the building code. We're only enforcing what we consider fire hardening, which is, stucco, fire resistant material, non-combustible material, vents of a certain maximum size openings. Those are only being enforced in the fire zone. And the fire zone is based off of the state fire marshal. They're the ones who put that together. If the structure is not currently in the fire zone, we're not requiring that. So we encourage it, but it's not a requirement per the building code because we have to follow what the fire zone is from the state.
And I think it's,
companies asking for that.
this, yeah, okay.
So remember, I don't do underwriting. I don't sell policies, so I don't necessarily know what the insurance company is gonna agree to insure or not. I just clean up the mess later.
Maybe a topic for a future conversation, but
Yeah.
so one of the key things that I want to chime in here. So if you couldn't hear that, the fire severity zone maps are changing this week. They've already been under review. So they're going to get expanded. This was preceding the fires. It was already in the works. But the one thing to understand is the building code is a minimum. Okay, it's a minimum for life safety. You can build better than the building code all day long. And so if there are things that you're concerned about, things that your insurance company says, we want you to do this, the insurance
Right.
companies are way far ahead of the risk equation than the building and safety, right? Because that takes a lot longer to change. But you can build better than the building code.
If I can say something kind of unorthodox, let's say that you're rebuilding and the building department graciously doesn't require you to do certain things. But you can have a conversation with the building inspector and say, please come down on me and make me do this stuff because I have 200,000 of building code upgrade coverage. And the building inspector, and I can't speak for you or your department, but they might say, you know what, you're right. I'm gonna write it up that you have to do X, Y, and Z. And then the insurance company would be forced to pay for it. I'm not saying that can happen. I'm not saying that you guys can do that, but I've seen it happen.
Speak to the inspection aspect of it, but if you do have building plans that are showing these elements, those are stamped approved plans by the building department. They are supposed to follow their plans. So if they do have fire hardening on their plans, they can't come back and say, oh, I don't want to do this at that point.
Right, but what I'm getting at is making the insurance company pay for it. And the insurance company sometimes try to say, well, you did that nice thing, but it wasn't required. And if the inspector has a lot of discretion to say, well, technically you're outside the zone, but I'm gonna require it anyway because there's a tree nearby. If they do that, then that forces the hand of the insurance company to pay for it under your law and ordinance coverage, which is often referred to as code upgrade coverage.
Okay, we're gonna keep going. to the next part, which is the financing. So we know that there's potentially a gap in the finance side after you get your insurance coverage, that you want to, fill, to be able to, for whatever reason, if it's just, I mean, you know, cost. But also if you're, you know, implementing some things that are, you know, nicer, you may want to put a little more money into it. So, Marcus, do you want to talk a little bit about the process of, the getting pre-qualified and how that process works?
Of course, yes. When it comes to.
Maybe stand up a
Okay.
little so that people can hear better.
Can everybody hear me? Great. I tend to talk a little loud, so. So when it comes to the financing for construction, more often than not, I see individuals either using their own money or perhaps using a private lender. However, take notes that when it comes to using your own money, you're probably going to be limited with cash. So when it comes to using a hard money lender, you're probably going to end up with high fees, a high interest rate. However, when it comes to financing through a traditional federal bank, there is a specific unique program. It's not like a first-time home buyer where you can go and get an FHA, VA loan, first-time home buyer, 0% down payment. Unfortunately, the guidelines are a little bit different. With the US Bank, it's a portfolio loan. Portfolio loan simply means that we use our own money. We could go up to 90% of the cost of the construction. The guidelines are pretty flexible as long as we meet the key components such as the FICO score, debt to income ratio. The minimum FICO score needed will be 680, but then you're going to be limited to a 45% debt to income ratio. Debt to income ratio is how much of your money is going to use to qualify you for the monthly payments, plus any other debts that you may have, like credit cards, car payments, anything that's shown on the credit report. Okay, now if you have a minimum FICO score of 720, then we can go up to 50% debt to income ratio, and we don't require any reserves. However, let me take a step back to the minimum FICO score of 680. We do require a 12-month principal and interest reserve to qualify you for the loan. Now, when it comes to the monthly payments, when it comes to the interest interest rates don't follow the normal standard industry. They're normally about half of a percent to 1% higher than a traditional mortgage loan. The interest rates that we currently offer on a construction loan is 6.5. The way that it functions is that you will pay interest only during the construction of your home. So let's say that you need $200,000 to fill in the gap. The first month you take $25,000, you pay interest only on the $25,000 as an example. Let's say the second month you draw another $25,000. Now you have a balance of $50,000. So the payments will be interest only on the $50,000 and so on until the project is completed. Once the project is completed, if there's any money left on the table, it will be used to reduce the principal loan amount, and then the payments will convert to both principal and interest for the remaining term. The remaining term, for example, if you do a 1-year construction, the remaining term will be 29 years. Let's say if you do a 2-year construction, then the remaining terms will be 28 years. When it comes to the financing, you're going to work with your contractor on how long it's going to take to build your home, whether it's going to take 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years. It's going to be very important to know that because that'll determine what the interest rate is going to be. Okay, or if there's going to be any add-ons. The great thing about getting financing through a federal bank is that we're very flexible. So let's say that once the loan funds and you need more money, once you start working on the project, and let's say that you're short on funds, you can always come back to the bank and we can work with you. Now, let's say that you do a 6-month construction, and for some reason the weather is not agreeable, you need more time, you need an extension, we can work with you with extensions. It's something that you don't see very often with a hard money lender, or possibly even using your own funds. Now, also, if you're, let's say another thing that I want to point out is, let's say that you're short on the funds. When it comes to after the loan funding, you can always come back to us. We can work with you on that as long as you don't make any changes to the plan.
Can you talk briefly about how the insurance money gets worked into this equation?
Of course. Now, when it comes to the insurance and funding the loan, the insurance money is deposited into escrow. We deposit our money into escrow. That's where the money is being drawn. Now, we work directly with the contractor. So the money is not coming from you. It's actually being given directly to the contractor as the project is completed.
And then can you talk about the pre-qualification of the contractor and that process?
When it comes to the construction financing, it's going to be two parts. One is qualifying you, and the other one is going to be qualifying the contractor. So we're looking for somebody that has a general contractor's license, they have insurance, and they have experience in building homes.
Okay, and so you get pre-qualified first, and then there's an appraisal that's part of that pre-qualification of the contractor and getting the loan actually funded. So can you talk briefly about the?
Of course. Now, when it comes to the project, we are going to do an appraisal, and we can finance up to 90% of the cost of the construction. So the appraisal is going to determine that the value is there to sustain our financing for the construction loan.
So they're gonna look at your actual building plans and say, does the cost to build these plans meet what they're saying it's going to be, right? And then that's how they're gonna determine that you're actually qualified for the money. Okay?
But half the money's probably coming from the first party insurance
Yes,
coverage.
yes, yeah.
And the other half is coming from a construction loan hypothetically.
Correct.
So it's not hard to qualify.
It's not. So let's say that you have an insurance company that's going to pay part or all of the construction, then that money is going to be deposited directly into escrow. Unfortunately, most insurance company will not give you a check directly for you to do your own construction. So you're going to get a financing through a federal bank. That money is deposited to escrow. We deposit our money into escrow, and that is where the funds are then being drawn directly by the contractor. You will pay interest only on the money that is being drawn. Once the construction is completed, the money is not refunded to you, but it's going to be used to reduce the principal loan amount.
And so when it's in escrow, they're gonna pay the contractor first with the insurance money, correct? So hopefully you're not paying interest on the borrowed money until towards the end of later in the construction process.
That is correct. If the money is not being drawn, then you're not paying any fees, you're not paying any interest. By the way, the loan has no prepayment penalty. So let's say if you wanted to turn around and refinance to a lower interest rate, let's say that you wanted to tap into the equity of the home that's already built, there are no prepayment penalties if you were to pay off or refinance the loan.
Okay, we're gonna keep going because we're getting through and I want to make sure we have time for questions. Thank you, Marcus. And we'll talk some more about these things as we go. So Jay, I think you're up next, right? Oh,
Yes, I mean, I think just to note, this whole presentation will be provided to you digitally. We have in here a mock-up of a sample construction log, just so that you can kind of understand what your expenses are and what to think about. You can use this as an example, and then there are links to the actual spreadsheet if anybody wants to download it. It's a starting point for you to understand your costs.
Yeah, something that I would like to share on our experience also is that we don't really wait for plans to be finished to start the bidding process. That's something that is important. We were talking about interviewing your contractor. There's some requirements the bank is going to have. I will highly recommend do not wait for plans to be finished. We highly recommend that once you get to planning, once you get your first round of comments from the building department, that you get your plans out. And we highly recommend that you stay on top of your architect and that he can track your revisions, because you are going to have comments from the building department. And again, you can easily update all your bidders by something that is called your delta revisions. That way, all the bidders can be aware of all the changes, and you will save months during the bidding process. That way, when your plans are finally approved, which it can take some time, you can start construction right away. So that's something that we do at our studio, and it's something that we have seen our clients reap the benefits out of that, because they can save a lot of time by doing that. But again, you need to be very disciplined about how you track those changes, because you need to update.
So just to clarify, it's not really possible in the real world for an architect to do plans that will go through the building department with no revisions. right?
Oh,
No, it's not a criticism.
I mean,
It's just the real world,
in
yeah.
14 years of experience, I've only done it once.
And how many revisions are normally necessary?
2.
Okay, and how long does it take start to finish typically to get approved?
2 to 3 months.
Okay,
2 to 3 months per revision, usually.
Well, let me say, for the rebuilds, Building and Safety Public Works has committed to doing a 10 business days turnaround for the first plan check.
Great.
And then 5 for the second, for the recheck. So we are starting to screen daily and extract the projects that are coming in from Altadena so that we can push those into plan check immediately. So that is something, so if you have complete plans, meaning architectural, structural, design calculations if necessary, and your Title 24 energy, then that would be a complete set. And if we have a complete set, then we are trying to push those into plan check immediately, as soon as possible. And like I said, we are processing submittals daily in order to accomplish that goal.
and this is,
For life or all projects?
That's all projects related to Altadena. So even if you have a structure that is standing, that is going to need some remodeling done, that will also be pushed into an expedited review.
and this is why state law requires the insurance company to give you 24 months of additional living expense. That doesn't mean they increase your limit. It means that they have to pay for 24 months instead of 12. If your policy says 12, you actually have 24. And because it is going to take longer, you might want to reconsider staying at the Four Seasons, you know, if that's what you're doing.
okay, so, Jay, can you talk through, the, basic design phases and what kinds of decisions need to be made in each of the design phases?
Sure. I mean, once you have a program and then once you know how much can you afford and what's going to be the size, and we talk about the 110%, we like to describe it as a schematic design is probably the first phase, which is going to be with Sean. So think about it as this part of like the artsy part of the project. You will have a few drawings for that. So you will have a site plan, you have floor plan, elevations, some renders. This is where we all have fun. This is where it's just very schematic. You're only looking at it from a bird eye view. You're just looking at things very, very just building blocks. And this is where you submit to the planning department. They will give you a clearance. Once you receive the clearance, this is where then things become a little more black and white, if you want it, for lack of a better term. That's where you get involved as structural engineer like Ricardo. And this is where you're gonna really get technical. This is where usually we recommend the clients to just freeze the drawings, stop looking at magazines, stop visiting your friend's house for ideas. We want those plans to be frozen. We want everything to just stop. This is where the creativity pretty much gets limited. And Ricardo can probably talk a little bit more about what's the process for the structural engineering.
We will.
And that's when we then submit to the building department. The building department will have some comments. The building department will provide with some feedback. But we also, this is where we do also your energy calculation. This is where we determine how the type of insulation you're gonna have in your roof, in your walls, the type of glazing that you're gonna have for your windows, and also your system for ventilation also and air conditioning. And while we do that, we also recommend that we get a contractor involved so he can start looking up. It's a whole orchestration that I think a lot of the responsibility gets put into the architect, but as a homeowner and as the owner, Kristen, you also have the power to push the boundaries, and you need to be satisfied with the services that you're receiving. And we have some clients that sometimes they want to be more technical on the construction side. We have some clients that sometimes they want to be more design driven. But it's really, I encourage you as the homeowner to really explore your options and push for something that you're going to be really happy with.
Yeah, so, oh yeah, go ahead, Christian.
I was just gonna add that there's also companies that are both architect and builder together. And a lot of times that can be helpful when you're pushing timelines.
So programming, to recap, programming is pre-designed, that's how big is it? What kinds of functions do I want in my house, right? Things like, I wanna make sure that I am super sustainable, high insulation, I don't want air conditioning because I'm gonna do natural ventilation and I'm gonna go, extreme, like, whatever your goals are, right? Set your goals, know what kind of, size, and types of spaces you want in your house. Schematic design is when you take all your goals and you tell your architect and they figure out how to make it all what it looks like. And that's the fun, dreamy part. And once you get past schematic design, you can change it, but it slows things down. So then it gets design development. What's it built out of? More technical. How's the structure work? What kind of building systems are using? And then construction documents is detailed stuff that you don't care about, but we do. Okay. We're gonna keep going because we're getting tight on time. And next is structural. So we know there's some key structural questions a lot of people have been talking about, so.
I try to stay within 7 minutes. I have, first thank everyone, Jessica, for organizing, and Kristen, and for LA County to be here. Really, it means a lot for the community. I think that you're here, so thank you for that. Oh yeah, sorry about that, yeah. So to reuse your foundation, you have to make a decision by March 31st. There's a lot of money involved in that, so make sure that you have that decision soon, and you only have 3 weeks. They're talking about to reuse the foundation, right? If you opt in with the Army Corps of Engineers, you have to make a decision by March 31st. Otherwise, you're gonna have to be paying that out of pocket or with your insurance money. They're talking about expanding that, moving that date, but I wouldn't rely on that for now until they do officially. Now, if you wanna reuse your foundation, you have to prove that your foundation is up to new code and it is suitable, right? So you will need to show to the county that didn't sustain extensive damage, and then you have to have a foundation suitability report from a structural engineer, and they have to stamp it. You have to be licensed in California, and they have to do some testing. So they have to have a visit, they have to come to your property, do a visit, write some testing. There are some guidelines that I think they can follow. They are published on the CIAO's website. I can write it down later, write it for you later. Where you can ask your structural engineer, or you hire a contractor or an architect to follow. They're gonna need a structural engineer to make sure that they follow step by step and have all the necessary information. They need to meet new code, or you can retrofit them. Typically, it's not practical to retrofit. Things to be expensive, and for a case like this where you don't have a house anymore, it might be just more cost effective to remove and build a new one if you have the, probably is more cost effective. Just a general recommendation, obviously it depends on your specific case. If your house is older than 1980, more or less, and smaller, it's probably not likely that your foundation is gonna meet new code. So it's unlikely that you're gonna be able to justify your foundation to the county. So I wouldn't really put a lot of thought. I mean, you can call a structural engineer, but I wouldn't go through the whole process and paying for a report, because then it will be $5,000-$10,000. And then they tell you have to pay for expensive retrofit or take it off. And then there's no money well spent that you don't have now. If your house is post 1980 and relatively large, it might be more likely that you can maybe find that it meets new code. You'll need to do some testing. You need to find rebar top and bottom of the foundation, and the concrete needs to be, not affected by fire. But then with all that information, maybe you can talk to the county, and then they will authorize to keep the foundation if you have everything there, right? But again, a typical Altadena house with a raised foundation, 1940, like our house, is very unlikely. Our house doesn't have rebar on the bottom. It's existing, so we're not gonna talk about it, but it's just expensive to, it's just expensive to hire rebar. I'm not giving you the answer. Yeah, so make sure that you make this decision before, in the next 2 weeks, right? Because then you don't want to be rushing to check the box to, if you opt in for the Army Corps, to check the box of demo foundation or not. So hurry up. You also have to retaining walls. My understanding is that the Army Corps is not demo, they're not removing retaining walls. So you're gonna have to consider, you have to understand what to do with that. You can also get a retaining wall suitability report from a structural engineer. I do recommend trying to rescue those because you're gonna have to remove them and build new ones. It tends to be expensive.
$1 million sometimes,
I mean, let's go hold on, like this, typically a small house.
not in Pasadena, but in some places.
Yeah, no, but let's not, yeah, like a small retaining wall. Like
Just saying,
2 feet,
think twice before you tear it down.
Yeah, so, for a small house, typically retaining wall is 2-3 feet, right? If you're on a hillside, then we're start talking about,
Yeah.
expensive.
Like in Hollywood Hills.
Yeah, but it's still in Altadena near the forest, right? The other elements that you have typically standing after a fire is a chimney, right? It's difficult to justify a chimney from a seismic point of view. From 1940s, 1950s chimney, definitely doesn't meet code. Most likely doesn't meet code, so you'll have to retrofit it. And then think twice if you want to keep it. I mean, there's a sentimental value to some chimneys. Think twice, because you have to work around the chimney for a footprint with the architect, right? So that will limit your possibilities, and then you have to retrofit, submit it to the county, they have to approve it. It's typically not an easy task, possible, but not an easy task. And if your house had CMU walls or brick walls in the interior and still burned, like the roof, fire got in, you have total damage. If it's older again than the 2000, 1980, it will be difficult to, it probably wouldn't have rebar inside, right? I just visited a house in the hills and they have some rebar, not enough rebar, and then you have to retrofit, it has to meet new code. And retrofitting a CMU wall to add rebar is not easy. So it could be easy, but it's not cute, right? You will add shortcrete is not something that you want in your house typically, right? It's a personal decision, but then typically it's better to ask the Army Corps if you opt in to remove, they take the debris. It's super expensive to remove those walls because they're very heavy. So again, you have to do that before March 31st. And if you want to keep your walls, you do have to negotiate with the Army Corps because the form doesn't have a check that keep walls. So you have to talk to them, negotiate, and probably be there and block them from. So this is something to consider that you may not be able to keep the walls even if you want. You have to talk to them right away, like next week, right? If you have a larger house, post 1980, relatively new, and you have all these elements and you want to keep, you can lump reports. So you can tell the structural engineer, come once, do the report, submit, so it will be more cost effective. And then the last thing I want to say is in terms of the 10 days, is this kind of off topic, but the 10 days that they're committing to is, I really like it. They're doing a great job, but it really depends on the quality of the drawings that your professionals or your contractor prepare, right? So we're going to put a lot of pressure on them to reply in 10 days, but you need to put a lot of pressure on your architect, engineers, or if you hire a contractor to do everything, typically you need to put a lot of pressure because they can submit 2 lines, sent to the county, and then when they take 11 days or reject the permit, and then say, oh, we're getting a lot of comments from the county, they're not being reasonable, etc. So see the drawings that they prepare and they make sure that they have everything they need to approve fast, right? If they get everything clean and everything ready, is an easy approval, right? Like he can tell you, like, you don't get comments. If you get not a very good set of drawings because you want to go fast, then they're gonna create, they're gonna have more comments and more rounds of review, right? So it's not only on them, it's also on the professionals that you hire, so make sure that, or the contractor, so make sure that you do that.
I think that's also a great point because it does take time to prepare drawings, right? You know, put the pressure on your design team, but also make sure you've given them a realistic time frame to do the drawings and work with you. I know that the more changes you make after that initial phase to the design, then the longer it will take them in the subsequent phases too, right? If they have to go back and redo things, right? And so that can be a little challenging for clients who've never been through the process to make decisions and be prepared to stick to them. That may be something that comes up. Okay, Jimmy, really quick, is gonna talk about the contractor role.
Absolutely. I'm just going to kind of give you a brief overview of general contracting so that, you know, people who have never built a home, which, I mean, that's a lot of people, kind of have an idea of what the process looks like. The general contractor is going to be your point of contact that will work with you to work with the subcontractors, work with all the tradesmen that you're going to need to build the home. They're going to be your point of contact. So when you have concerns, you have questions, you go to the general contractor, and then they're going to relay that to the plumbers, the electricians, the mechanical. They're also going to be working side by side with your design team, whether it's your structural engineer or your architect. Early on in the phase, you know, they're going to be able to, you know, if you have ideas where maybe I want to do this, maybe I want to do that. If you're working with a contractor, you can start looking at the cost differences for those things, and then we can start looking at value engineering options so that you're actually building and drawing something that at the end is something that's within budget so that you don't have to make revisions at the end because everything's out of the right parameters. So it's good to bring a contractor on early. At the initial phase where you're at right now, you can do you know, a budget bid with a contractor. You could talk to them about square footage, bedroom count, bathrooms, number of stories. If it's going to be very similar to what you had, you can show pictures and really start weeding through many contractors by just getting budget bids, developing a rapport, making sure that's somebody that you can work with, because this is a long-term project. You're going to be working with them, you know, a day in and day out for many months. So you want to make sure you have somebody that you're comfortable with, that is responsive, that is answering the questions, that you feel comfortable with the answers, and you know, bring them on early. You can really start working with your design professionals to be able to have a turnkey project when it's submitted to the county, when it comes out of plan check with a permit, you can hit the ground running. You have everything figured out. The other thing too is the contractor is going to build the schedule. They're going to sequence the trades. So the contractor is going to make sure that you're doing your framing before you start with your air conditioning. So they're going to put together the schedule, make sure all the trades are sequenced, make sure that when one trade's finishing, the next one's lined up to go. That's going to cut down on your overall production of the construction process and the overall schedule the contractor is going to provide you in the beginning. Some of the things to look at when you're in terms of selecting a contractor, getting referrals from your professional. Like if you have an architect you love, he probably has contractors he's worked with. He can be a great referral source. If you have friends that have had contractors, getting a referral is probably one of your best ways of really vetting a contractor. Interview them, asking them for some of their previous contacts, their previous clients, so that you can talk to them. Get a few addresses of homes they've built so that you can go see the quality of work and to find out if that's what fits within what you're looking for. The main thing too is making sure that you vet the contractor. Make sure that you go to the CSLB, the California State License Board, make sure they're licensed, make sure they have workers' comp. One of the main things you want to do too is become additionally insured. Making sure not only that they have the insurances, but then their insurance broker is going to give you an additionally insured certificate so that if in fact lapse of coverage during this period of time, whether it be a year or 18 months. If for some reason for non-payment, the policy gets canceled, you're notified. The last thing you want is somebody working on your property and they get hurt. That now becomes your liability if you become the work comp carrier, if they don't have those coverages. So you want to protect yourself. Once you have a more, like I said in the beginning, you can get a budget bid so you can start weeding down to which contractor you like. But once the plans get to a certain point, they're going to be able to submit that to the contractor where they can give you a lump sum bid where they can go through each thing and you have a firm fixed price of what you're building. So that way you can know that you're within budget. The other thing is payment schedule. one thing that always happens in this thing is that you get a contractor and right away they ask for a large upfront deposit. You'd never want to give a large upfront deposit. You know, once you're signing with a contractor, one of the things you want to have before you ever sign with a contractor is get an insurance certificate so that they have to make sure they have adequate coverage. Make sure you have a payment schedule kind of negotiated beforehand, and make sure you have a schedule. Once you want to have all those things before you sign on the dotted line, and the best way, you know, once you sign on the dotted line, you're looking at $1,000 deposit to get a contractor started. If they're asking for half up front or something like that, you want to stay away from that.
It's not legal either.
It's not legal, but it happens, and that's where most of the time I find homeowners get in trouble is that they pay a large deposit. They call me and say, "Hey, we have a problem," and I say, "Well, you've already spent 3/4 of the budget. How are you going to switch to another contractor? You're already out of money." So when you're working with a bank and those things, they're going to make sure that doesn't occur because they're protecting their investment. But if you're not working with a bank and you're paying out of pocket, you want to make sure that and the best way to do it is set up a monthly draw where you predetermine at what phase the first, the 15th, the last day of the month, whatever that you work out. But then they submit to you an invoice that says what they're billing you for, and that should be things that are already done. You should never be paying in advance. You should always be paying for work that's completed. Therefore, you're always ahead of your payments are ahead of the construction process. If in fact there is a problem, then you've paid for what you've paid for is actually completed, and you can switch to somebody else if need be. The other thing is talking about is retention. If the contractor's invoicing you each month, you can hold 10% back for retention. Now, this needs to be pre-decided, you know, with the contractor before the contract, but have it written in. Hold back 10% to be able to hold, you know, this last 10% all the way to the end. So when the house is completely done, you're 100% satisfied. It's been signed off by the building department. They've submitted for a certificate of occupancy, which is basically the legal document that says your house is habitable to live in. Then the punch lists are completed. You're extremely happy. You release that last 10%, but you're holding that 10% to make sure things get done the way they're supposed to be done. And you just really don't want to, you know, be in a position where you've paid too much in advance. The other thing is that sometimes they'll ask for deposits for certain special order items, which is maybe like windows and doors. Those have to be paid up in advance. You can ask, you know, for a vendor invoice for those items, and then you can write a joint check to the contractor, to the vendor, so that you know that that money is going and buying a special item, whether it be doors or windows, something that has a long lead time, something that is, you know, a special order that has to be paid in advance. So there is times when you will pay a deposit, but you want to make sure that's going to something directly that you're buying. And you know,
and the product you're getting is the one that you agreed with your architect that specified.
Correct.
And
Absolutely.
the builder is actually buying that Anderson window or whatever you wanted.
Absolutely. And you review that in that invoice, and you're making sure that you're not just giving a window deposit, which is going into their account, and you're hoping they ordered windows. Now you can set it up so if you are doing a larger deposit, you know that's going to buy an item that will be coming directly to your property.
So there's a couple key things I want to touch on is your architect will help you during the construction process, right? You don't have to have your architect help you, but that is something that we do on a regular basis. We will review what they call pay applications, which is where we say, have all of these things actually been completed to the level that they say they are? We will review submittals where the contractor sends us information about the material that they are going to procure and make sure it does match what we specified in our drawings. So your architect will walk through that construction process with you to help make sure that that is all happening properly. Okay. Oh yeah, super. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to just add that actually when you go financing through a federal bank, the bank will work with the contractor on the draw schedules or any changes on the orders. So we actually take that from you and we actually work with the contractor directly. You are kept informed throughout the entire process, but we actually handle that for you versus if you go through our Harmony lender where they give you the money and then you need to do things on your own. Also keep in mind also if you want to, before you start your project, make sure that you're qualified or you have the funds needed, because once you start the construction, the bank, if you want to come back to the bank and get financing, we won't do financing if it's more than 35% completed.
Interesting.
Okay. We're gonna take questions
So
now.
can I just add that the contractor is also responsible for inspections with the city or?
Absolutely.
That's a
county, right?
great point.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
just don't forget, they
Right.
have to pass all the inspections.
Absolutely. Yeah, your
until-
contractor is gonna be scheduling and working with the county building inspectors to get everything signed off. They're also gonna be working with the structural engineer for structural observations, so, you know, we frame a house, we say it's done right, the county isn't gonna say it's done right until he comes out and says, yep, that's what I drew. So there's a lot of checks and balances along the way to make sure.
And a lot of times the progress payments are predicated on sign off from the city inspector. So
Yep.
you don't get the electrical money until the electrical signed off.
Correct.
And then the architect can also go to the house and check it too.
Yes, absolutely. Do some construction observation.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Real quick, while we're talking about construction, how can we protect homeowners from a lien being placed on that home?
Oh, great question. One of the main things.
Oh, I'm sorry, really quick. I'm gonna repeat it just for the people at home.
Yeah.
The question was, how do you prevent a lien getting placed onto your property?
Yeah, so anybody, so you're gonna hire a contractor, you're gonna know who that contractor is, you're hiring him, you're signing their contract. Now, if they hire subcontractors, plumber, electrician, they buy material from a lumber yard, windows from a window dealer, you don't know who those people are. Those people are going to be supplying those things based on the fact that if they don't get paid, they're gonna put a lien on your home. So within 21 days of any of those contractors starting, they've got to mail you a preliminary notice so that you know who they are because you're not signing a contract with them. So you want to make sure that you have all of those preliminary notices. You want to keep track of those. And as things, you hit milestones, let's say electrical done and you're paying for the electrical, you're going to go in there and say, okay, ABC Electrical is doing the electrical. There, you can ask the contractor for a release that says, I'm paying X amount of dollars for electrical, and that the subcontractor who sent you that preliminary notice is going to have signed it saying, this is a release, I cannot put a lien on you because I've received XYZ dollars. You'll do that, there's progress releases along the way. And then at the end, before you pay out your final payment, before you pay a retention, you're gonna wanna look at all of those people that sent you a preliminary notice, and you're going to want to make sure that you get a final unconditional release from each of them before you pay that final payment. And what that is basically saying is that everybody that's worked on your house, everybody that's had materials delivered to your house are paid in full and nobody has lien rights to put on your house. And then if something happens down the way, you'll have all of those releases. And it's something you want to definitely keep track of. And if any contractor doesn't want to do that, that's probably a red flag.
And there is also limitations on the liens too. The liens are not forever. There is usually 60-day, 90 days.
Right.
It's limited.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. From the completion date, when you say the house is substantially completed, the clock starts. And if a third party, a subcontractor or a vendor has an issue, they have to put a lien on your house within that 60, 90 days. They can't come back 3 years later and say, oh, by the way, I wasn't paid.
So, I just want to point out, so one thing that the AIA does is has standard contract forms for contracts between the owner and the architect and the owner and the contractor. And we think they're fairly fair. They're really great. If you use those contracts, this process will be spelled out in those contracts, okay? And they'll describe the owner's responsibilities, the contractor's responsibilities, the architect's responsibilities for construction, and they're like aligned with each other. So that's a great resource. You can talk to your architect about using one of those. And there are different formats depending on what you're
And
doing.
it's free, right?
No.
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 I think even if, for whatever reason, you choose not to use it, the templates are available online. You can read through them. The instructions are there. It's a useful reference. Even if you don't end up pulling that contract, you should read through them because it does clearly describe the process. It's very useful.
Jessica, yeah,
Yeah, just if anyone has cards, we're going to collect them.
question cards.
Yeah, question cards.
Yeah. Hey, can I ask a question about the type of contracts that a homeowner can request a contractor? They're like strictly lump sum, GMP. What if you were a homeowner that just lost a house in Pasadena? What would you recommend, or what would you do? What would you request from a contractor to protect yourself?
Yeah.
Nothing as a contractor, but as a homeowner.
Right. There's different contracts. So a lump sum contract is essentially saying, here are the plans, here are the drawings, here's the price to build that, locked in. Some of the other ways of doing it, contracts is cost plus type bids where you're gonna hire a contractor. He's gonna have a set building fee. He's gonna have a set fee or margin on every subcontractor. And then he's gonna go out and he's gonna get multiple plumbing bids, multiple electric bids, sit down with you. You guys figure out which way you want to go. The lump sum gives you a good picture of what it's going to cost to build your home. Doing it the other way, it affords you a lot of flexibility if you plan on making changes or you're not quite sure what you want to do. You're not quite sure what finishes, where you want things. That's going to leave you a lot more flexibility, but the total picture of what something's going to cost may not be as clear. If you go with the lump sum route and halfway through you decide, you know what, I want the kitchen on the other side of the house, then you start getting into change orders and that kind of opens things up too. So you really, if you're going to go lump sum, you really want to make sure that you have a really good understanding of what you want. Slight variations, you want to move the kitchen sink 6 inches one way or the other, that's one thing, but flipping it to the other side of the house, or now you want the, kitchen upstairs and the bedrooms downstairs, you make drastic changes, that's gonna open up change orders and gets expensive.
This is really important for the insurance money, because your policy has certain things that you must quote unquote incur or complete, depending on the wording of the policy. So if your policy says you have to incur the replacement cost, or it says you have to incur the law and ordinance known as code upgrade, then if your adjuster is playing fair and understands the meaning of the word incur the same way everyone else does, the adjuster will agree that since you have a signed contract with your contractor, he's going to write you a check, or she's going to write you a check for that replacement cost, the held back depreciation or the code upgrade money. They're going to write you a check for it because you've incurred it by having that contract. If they take a more strict interpretation of the word incur, or if the policy says you have to complete the work, then you will not only need a contract, but you'll have to let the adjuster come over and look at the completed work or send photos or certificate of completion or something, and then you get your money. But if you don't have the paperwork to show that you've at least incurred that expense, you won't get that extended replacement cost money. You won't get that depreciation back, depending on your policy. Some policies are more liberal in the sense that more generous is probably a better word. They'll pay it up front, but a lot of them require you to jump through that hoop and show a contract with the contractor.
Can I add something to this?
Yes.
Can I go back to something that Jay said? So at the very beginning, you got that schematic phase, and then you got design development, and then you got construction development on your drawings. As a developer, as a homeowner, it's very possible and very likely that as you're going through those phases and you're getting a bid here, you might see those costs go up, right? And it's entirely feasible that it may be substantial because now we have unforeseen circumstances associated with the potential new tariffs coming on board.
Right.
So really what you need to be asking your contractor is how, at least on a more advanced set of drawings, how good are your numbers still? Right? So,
Right, no, absolutely.
so let's say I'm almost at the end of my CD, my construction development. How far out is your number good for if you put a
Right.
number down?
Yeah.
A month, 2 months, 3 months?
Yeah, for me,
Yeah,
I would hold it probably 6 months.
that's amazing.
How do you do that?
Because the general
Yeah.
contractors that we use will give me 1 month.
Yeah.
1 month, right? So that's super important.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
we're
that
gonna
is
take
important to request that because commercial contractors are a little bit different. Residential, you should be trying to ask as much as possible. You don't want to be dealing with tariffs, inflation, right?
Right,
It's really,
Jessica's gonna ask a couple of questions from the card.
Yeah, so almost all of them were actually related to the kind of validation of area or footprints, and then how you get your records and how you validate the 110% rule. So the first is that our current understanding, and please feel free to correct us, is that the area is going to be the LA County Assessor's recorded area. Is that correct? So that is the number of square feet that is the like for like, if you're gonna follow that pathway. I know that some folks see that there are discrepancies between the area that they had built versus what the county assessor has recorded. So is there a recourse path if they'd like to kind of appeal that number or correct it?
So you can always go for Altadena, to the Building and Safety to San Gabriel District Office, where building permit records are kept. and request building permit records for the address. And if we have building permit records and the permit record is signed off, finalized, and it may give a square footage that may be able to help with that.
Yep. And this brings up kind of a second question, which is about things about unpermitted construction. So you might have additions or renovations or changes to your property. The assessor may have assessed that as part of your square footage. And that might be in the assessor's number, but if it's not and it's unpermitted, then it's going to be unlikely that you'll be able to count that towards your rebuild square footage.
Can I ask you a question? I have a 1924 house. And I know this is similar to what a lot of people have. So I have every reason to believe that the upstairs bathroom and the downstairs bathroom are original from 1924 based on little construction details. But it shows with the city as one bathroom. And I was speculating maybe the people didn't tell the truth because they were trying to get it pushed through. And is that a common thing? And how would someone navigate that if what they had is actually, I know you don't like the word grandfathered, but, or maybe you do, I don't know, but how does somebody navigate that if what they had is actually different from what's on record?
So I would say, when you're talking about specifics of the interior, we're less concerned about that when it comes to the fire rebuild. So, the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, that's less of a concern as the footprint of the house is. The assessor does in their records, a lot of times if they go out there and they assess some square footage that they don't have records from the building department, they will put some kind of note on their record saying, like field pickup, FPU on their records that says that we understand it's there, but we can't find building permit records for this addition for this specific thing. So, the building department specifically, we keep records all the way back to the 1930s. So in your case, we wouldn't even have a building permit record for that. And so we would have to depend on what the assessor has. But specific to the number of bathrooms, bedrooms, building department is not looking at it that closely. We're trying to stay with the square footage in terms of like, well, I shouldn't speak for them, but.
And the square footage you're talking about is the way an appraiser does it, measured from the outside, not from the inside, correct?
That's correct.
Because the outside is what do the architects say? 5–10% bigger? Already.
It's square footage, yes.
But is that physical square footage or is that entire?
No, that's
From the
building,
outside.
building area from the outside wall in.
Right, because your wall is 6 inches thick almost, so it adds up to a lot.
So essentially for my department, with the like for like, with the rebuild, what we're looking at for the square footage and for the height of the building and the footprint, we need it to be found on some government approved document, permit, something like that. So either my department, regional planning's approval, the building department, or the assessor department. A lot of Altadena was built in the teens and 20s, which was before we required building permits. If there's a way to show that this house was here in 1920 and this wing that's not on the assessor records was here in 1920 and it's been here for the past 100 years and the assessor never found out it's been for 100 years, then, you know, we can move with that. But we need it to be on some official approved documentation. For the square footage, anytime our code mentions square footage or size, we measure from the outside wall. And so it's all the enclosed areas. So if you have a porch or something that, you know, you can add on your porch, that's fine. You know, we're looking at, you know, the livable square footage. Garage is similar, you know, we kind of use 10% rule across for, you know, any change you want to make. Yeah. You know, you can change the garage, 10% change, you know, upgrade the house, 10% the height, etc.
Yes.
And we're not looking at the footprint, or not the footprint, the floor plan at all. So we're just overall dimensions of the building, change from a ranch to a Spanish colonial and add a bedroom. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, I think the square footage number on the assessor's website excludes the garage. Is that correct?
It typically does, but it should also have an outline of the garage on the building description blank. So we can go, so even if the assessor's record says, you know, the house is 1,038 square foot, we can actually go in the record and see, okay, here's the, you know, 15 by 40, whatever the measurements are. And then here's also this other accessory structure that's, you know, 20 by 20 or whatever. So so, you know, that one number that it shows, you know, on, you know, our mapping system, you know, that is the main number what we'll use as the starting point, but we'll take a look at the record, take a look. If you have a building permit for your garage, you know, we can use that as well. And so,
Oh, so you're allowing people to build the main structure, and if the garage also burn, add that as part of the main structure square footage?
they're
That's a like
they're
for
not
like?
transferable between the two, but
Okay.
in terms of, you know, if you know, you had a garage that had like a laundry and storage room in the back and that burnt, you can construct that garage and the laundry and storage
Okay.
room and add 10% to that structure, but it wouldn't be
Okay, not
transferable between
transferable,
the
okay.
buildings. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, okay, go ahead.
Quick question for planning as well. In terms of the location on the lot,
Mhm.
how strictly is that going to be enforced? Because we had a lot of trees at one side, which are no longer there, and our house was right next to a fence on the other side. So moving the house like 15 feet makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
But not if it's going to result in being reassessed and having to go through a massive planning process.
And so that's the thing, and so, you know, just with the reassessment, if you want any information on how it'll affect your taxes, you need to speak with the assessor. So anything I say is just for our permitting process to move you through the process. So essentially, like I said, that 10% is kind of the magic number. There are a few things where, you know, how do you measure 10% of shifting the house 2 feet over, spinning it 2 degrees or whatever you want. So, you know, it'll be a bit, you know, kind of, you know, we'll have to see exactly what you're, you know, planning, go on a case by case basis. Typically, we are more willing to entertain changes if they would bring you closer into compliance with our code. So for instance, if you're 2 feet away from your neighbor's property line and current code would require you to be 10 feet away, we're more than happy to let you move that full 10 feet and you know, come into compliance. Same thing with an oak tree. If you, so I don't know how many of you are familiar with our oak tree permit process. Typically to build anything, you know, from a house to just laying a driveway in the protected zone of an oak tree, you need a permit for that. You will be exempt for the like for like replacement. Anything new, including the 10%, if it's within the oak tree zone, would need a oak tree permit. But let's say that your house was built under the tree and you want to move it, you know, away from the tree. We're more willing to entertain a bigger move if you're moving it out of the protected zone of the tree, but you can't move it closer to the tree, so stuff like that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to contextualize this entire conversation for residents. I'm Steve Lewis, I'm an architect and I'm a resident of.
Do you mind coming up so we can catch your voice on this microphone? Thank you.
My name is Steve Lewis. I'm an architect and a resident of Pasadena since 1980. Also a member of Pasadena Foothill AIA chapter and representing So Cal NOMA today. We're getting doom and gloom about regulation today, and I just wanted to remind all of you that the whole purpose of all of this is in the interests of the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And if that was not an issue, we'd be, you know, wild, wild west all over again, doing what we want to do. So I want to just express appreciation for all the expertise that's come. There's been a ton of information coming at you. And if you're in the profession like many of us are here, we get it. But for those of you who are just trying to follow it all, the AIA has Ask an Architect, NOMA has our assistance program. So when you're done, come out there, get some information, and there are plenty of us who are volunteering to help residents sort of make sense out of all of this.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.
So I think we're about out of time for questions. Oh, one more? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, two questions for planning. If I understand correctly, from a building footprint standpoint, if you have a covered porch or patio that is covered as part of the main roof of the house, is that part of the building footprint?
So, but it's unenclosed, so it has a roof, but no
If
wall.
it's not enclosed on 3 sides.
So no, my understanding is no, that wouldn't be, so
Okay,
the
that's
square,
fine.
the square footage in the footprint tends to just be the enclosed areas. Porches also typically have extra allowances for projecting into setback, so let's say you need 20 feet in the front, you can build the front wall of your building to 20 feet from the front property line, but then a covered porch can project 5 feet into that. And so that's what, you know, we couldn't really transfer between the two because it might have, there's extra allowances that we give for unenclosed structures that wouldn't comply for the enclosed.
Second part, maybe it's been said. I've heard that it could be 10% in the like for like. or 200 square feet, whichever one is greater,
Exactly.
is that valid?
And yeah, so that's an update that we've made, the beginning of this week, so this is brand new, hot off the press, so. And I recognize, a bunch of you from seeing you at the recovery center and speaking with you, so. I've always said, check in with us and, we're constantly trying to update, but that is one of the major updates that we've had is, we have matched the city's requirement. So again, 10% or 200 square foot, whichever is greater.
Okay, so, just to wrap up. Yes,
I have on the bank people. Banker sitting right there.
oh, yeah,
Quick things, the money that goes from our recovery to the mortgage holder. Now, we are supposed to use that money for the building. Now, can we draw from that money when we are working with the architect and the structural engineer?
You don't, unfortunately, the money doesn't go to you, so if you wanted to draw money, that's not possible. The money that we fund is strictly for the project, the construction itself, so you don't get any of that money back.
Okay, so we don't.
okay. Guys, so we're just about out of time and I just want to hit a couple little things. We will be, out in the lobby after we finish. So if you have some specific questions, there's the Ask an Architect table that you can do, or you can sign up. So we have these resources on the presentation. There's links to tons of great information here. A couple that I'll point out. Well, so the QR codes are to the AIA Pasadena Foothill chapter website and the Ask an Architect sign up specifically, but there are also links to things like license verification websites. All of the people who are involved on the design and construction side have to be licensed through the state, and you can verify those licenses with the state to make sure they're in good standing. So there's all kinds of really great information and links. You will get this presentation via email since we got your email when you signed up. And then I just want to say thank you for coming. We know there's a lot of information. Thanks for sticking it out with us. I want to say thank you to our panelists who all volunteered to be here. And who volunteered on short notice because we were trying to put this together fast enough to get you the information quickly. I want to remind you if you want additional programming or resources in the future, fill out one of these want more info pages. And I want to say thank you to Parsons again for hosting us. And I want to say a huge thank you to our organizing team. I have volunteered to organize things many, many times. And if you've ever done that, you know how when you say, who can do this? And you hear crickets, that was never the case with this team. So this organizing team has been an incredible team. To put something together like this at this scale in basically 2 months was quite an undertaking. And so thank you to all of them who were involved. So help yourself to refreshments and talk to the architects out there.